Thank you, Liz. All right, so as Liz said, we're going to talk a little bit today about deploying and managing your Power BI solutions. This whole month at Pragmatic Works for the training, free training on the T's, we're going to be doing a lot of Power BI stuff. So this is kind of just an overview of some of the administration pieces. Pieces of this here and there will likely be covered in some of the other webinars, but this is today we're going to take a look at this and kind of look at all your different options as far as how to actually deploy and manage those different solutions there. Give you guys a little bit of an idea about what the three options are for Power BI, which you guys just voted on and said which ones you have actually used. So it is a little bit interesting. You know, Liz mentioned that was kind of interesting that Power BI, most people, or that 11% of the folks out there said that Power BI was what they had done the most deployments on. And the reason why that's kind of interesting is that Power BI is actually still in preview. It's not technically a full-blown product at this point, so there's only a preview of that service out there right now. It doesn't have all the full functionality that you have in the regular Office 365 version of Power BI. That's also good, though, that those 11% of the people have done the most deployments on there, because that means that Microsoft is kind of getting the word out there about some of these new services that they have to offer. So, you know, previously people may not have even known about Power BI, but now some of the things that they're doing with the new Power BI pieces on PowerBI.com there are really helping to get the word out and really helping drive some of the end user functionality and the end user reporting and drive more and better reporting inside of the enterprise. So it's interesting to see that and really good to see that at the same time. So I know a lot of you guys said that you hadn't done any deployments yet. So about 70% of people said that they hadn't done any deployments. So we'll give you a quick overview of all the different options that we have for Power BI today, and hopefully get you a little bit better idea of which one of these is going to be working out for you in the near term, and hopefully which ones of these are going to be your go-to solution maybe in the future here as well. So real quick, a little bit about myself. You'll see pizza and kittens all over the place because there's not enough Power BI screenshots out there or any demos or anything that Microsoft has done that involve pizza or kittens, so we'll try to make our own today. I do work at Pragmatic Works here in Jacksonville, Florida is where I'm located at. I do the free training on the T's here with us quite frequently, and I also do SQL Saturdays and speak at all kinds of other stuff wherever I happen to be at with my consulting engagements as well. So if you happen to be in the Southeast anywhere or doing some SQL Saturdays, we usually have about one a quarter down here between all the different locations in Florida. So be sure to come out down here in any of the Southeast locations and check out what's going on at those events as well. All right, so what we're actually going to talk about today, since most of you, it looks like, haven't done any deployments, yet on Power BI, we'll talk a little bit about what Power BI actually is. So it's a little bit more in depth than just saying it's Excel that we can deploy online. So there's a lot more to it than just a little bit of Excel that we can expose to our users. So we'll start by talking about what Power BI actually is, and then we'll talk about the current state of Power BI. So what's going on with Power BI today? We'll talk a little bit about some of the history of Power BI, kind of how we got to where we are. And then part of that current state of Power BI is going to be those next two bullet points there. So we have SharePoint Online and SharePoint On-Premise. So SharePoint that you host here in your own office, so inside of your own data center, sort of a situation there. So we'll talk about the differences between those two, as well as the supported functionality between those two. So which one is more functional, which one has better capabilities for different situations. We'll kind of talk about the pros and cons of both SharePoint On-Prem as well as SharePoint Online. And when we say SharePoint Online, we really mean Office 365, so those enterprise Office 365 offerings that Microsoft has out there. And then finally, we'll talk about the future of Power BI. So I've mentioned, you heard me mention a couple times already, and you saw in the poll there, that we talked about PowerBI.com. So that's really the future of deployment for Power BI. That's the way that things look like they're all going right now. And we'll talk about some of the tools that are involved with doing the development and the deployment as well. We won't get into too much detail as far as the actual development pieces go, but like I said, there's definitely a few other webinars throughout the rest of the month of April here that are going to go much more in depth on the actual tools for building some of these Power BI solutions. Okay, so we'll start with what Power BI is, talk about what's going on with Power BI right now, and then we'll wrap up with what is going to be happening with Power BI in the future. All right, so Power BI is really, it's kind of an end user reporting and dashboarding tool. It's a combination of a lot of different things. So if you see on what we have on the screen here is actually a preview of the Power BI dashboards that are currently in place. And so we can actually deploy these out to our SharePoint Online, and users can have access to them on their mobile devices or through their web browser. They don't have to be connected to our network necessarily. So one of the big things that is really driving a lot of the features in Power BI, and that you'll see, is the fact that we have an increasingly mobile workforce that needs to get access to information. And Power BI is really one of the ways that we can give users access to information. It's certainly not the only way, but it combines a lot of different tools that they're already familiar with, like Excel, and allows them to do some of the reporting themselves, but also access enterprise-level reporting out in the field as well. Okay. So you'll hear me say a couple of different things. When I talk about today, I really mean Power BI for Office 365. So if you were to go out and sign up for Power BI right now with your enterprise, you would be using Office 365 for all your external hosting. Obviously, we'll talk slightly, just a little bit here about SharePoint On-Prem as well. But when we talk about things that are happening today with Power BI, we're really talking about Office 365 setups. Okay, so that's how we're going to be deploying and managing our data currently. When we talk about the future, we're really talking about that Power BI preview that's out there currently. One of the really great things about that Power BI preview that they're working on for the future of Power BI is that they're doing a lot of updates to that service right now. There's actually been, I think, 2 updates in the last 3 weeks. They actually just released an update yesterday, I believe it was, for Power BI, and I think the last update was on March 15th. The update before that was in the middle of February. So they're doing a lot of really good things with that. They're pushing a lot of updates out for the service right now. And one of the great things about it is it's free for you to go out there and do any of the development on these on the Power BI tools there. So definitely something worth checking out if your enterprise is interested in getting into the Power BI space. So definitely keep in mind that future of Power BI that we're going to be talking about a little bit later. Okay, so today Office 365, future is Power BI or PowerBI.com. Okay, so Power BI essentially is a way for us to get data from a bunch of different locations. We don't have to necessarily pull data only in from data that we have on-prem. So a lot of companies spend a huge amount of time and a huge amount of money building out these massive data warehouses. And those are great, and they're great places to be able to drive enterprise standards, enterprise reporting, enterprise logic. So that way when we go into a meeting and we say, you know, what was my profit for last month? Everybody's speaking the same language. So data warehouses are really great for doing that sort of thing. But not everybody in our organization is going to get all the data that they need from our data warehouse. So what Power BI allows us to do is query data from our data warehouse and mash it up or combine it with data maybe that we get from the Azure Data Marketplace or any external data source. Or maybe I've got a file that a customer sent me and I've got that Excel sheet just sitting on my desktop. So it's not something I need to put into the enterprise data warehouse, but it's information that I want to supplement the enterprise data warehouse with. So Power BI allows us to take both of those individual data sets and mash them up together and do some really good visualizations on top of that data there. Okay? So when we talk about Power BI, we're really talking about all these different tools that we have to bring data in from a variety of locations, whether that's internal, multiple internal locations. Maybe you guys don't have a data warehouse currently. It's certainly not a requirement to use Power BI. You can read right from Oracle data sources. You can read right from SQL Server data sources. And you can combine those data sets together on your own, and then build some visualizations in some of the other tools that we have available to us inside Power BI. And then the most important part is sharing and collaborating with other members of your team. So it's one thing to be able to create these data mashups and create these visualizations, but information is very powerful in organizations, and it doesn't really do us any good if we don't share that information. So that's a key part of the whole Power BI experience, is being able to share and collaborate on these different reports that we're going to build. So it doesn't do Pragmatic Works any good if I go out and I create this awesome marketing report and I never give it to Liz. It's only going to help if I take that, I create that marketing report, and then I put it out there someplace on a share of some sort so that Liz can also take a look at that and be able to leverage that information as well. Okay. All right. So when we're talking about Power BI, there's a few different pieces of the puzzle that come into play here. So the first one is going to be something called Power Query, and you're going to see more and more of Power Query coming up as we move forward. When we start talking a little bit more about the future part of Power BI, the PowerBI.com and the Power BI Designer, you're going to see that Power Query plays a much more central role in that experience than it really does today. Okay. Currently, though, if you want to leverage the functionality of Power Query, you can absolutely do that. It's just an add-in for Excel. Essentially, what that tool does is it allows you to go out, query a variety of data sources. Again, that can be Oracle, it can be SQL Server, it could be Teradata, it could be anything stored in Azure, it could be HD Insight data, a variety of data sets that it can handle there. You can query those, and you can actually shape the data a little bit as well. So there's a whole query language built around Power Query called the M language, and it's very good for taking large sets of data and manipulating those large sets of data as well. Okay. So I see one of the questions that we have in the chat right now that I'm taking a look at says, how big can it handle for data size? That's more and more as data grows inside of our organizations, that becomes more and more of an issue. The great news is there's actually very, very good compression inside of Power Pivot, which is the next little piece that we'll talk about here. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to take Power Query, we're going to go out, we're going to find the data that we want, we're going to do a little bit of shaping of that data with that M language, and then we're going to bring it into Power Pivot, and we're going to relate all that data together. So when we bring it into Power Pivot, that's where we take our data warehouse data and we mash it up, and we tell it how that data is related to something maybe that I pulled in from the Azure Data Market. The great thing about Power Pivot is that it uses an in-memory storage system. It's the same technology that's used for your clustered column store index inside of SQL Server or inside the APS platform at this point. And it gets very, very good compression on your data. So, I've built Excel workbooks for Power Pivot that have been a couple of gigabytes in size. The only real size limitation that you run into is memory on your machine, and depending on whether or not you're uploading the data into SharePoint. Because if you upload the data into SharePoint, if you take it out of just the Excel experience and move it into SharePoint, you do have a little bit of a limitation there as far as how much data can be in there, and that would be a 2 gigabyte file size limit to upload it to SharePoint. Another question that just came up, great question, says, can you use Power Query to source from MDX cubes or SQL Server analysis services? Absolutely. So both Power Pivot itself can read directly from analysis services, but also Power Query can read out of analysis services as well, both tabular and multidimensional there. And there are both 32 and 64-bit versions of all the software here for Power BI, so no need to worry about whether your enterprise has 32-bit machines or 64-bit. And one of the beauties of this is that it doesn't follow just that 1 million record count inside of Excel. So I can have as much data as I can store in memory there inside of Power Pivot. Okay. So once we get that data connected inside of Power Pivot, we get that whole piece built, then we're going to go over into a tool called Power View. And Power View is really a drag and drop reporting environment. It's crazy easy for your end users to go out there and build reports inside of Power View. Currently there's no way to actually write queries even inside of Power View. It's 100% a drag and drop user experience inside of there. So it's very focused on helping your end users take that data that they've already put together inside of Power Pivot and give them the ability to create some pretty awesome reporting out of that. And then finally we have Power Map. So Power Map allows you to plot geographic and temporal data visually and really access that data, animate that data and put that on top of a map of the United States. You can build things like heat maps and animate the maps over time and do all kinds of really cool stuff there inside of Power Map when you plot that geographic data that you have inside your organization. Okay. And then finally, Power BI, again, this is that key point to make with the sharing and collaboration is that data access everywhere. Again, people are on the move. Nobody just stays in the same place anymore. We need to be able to access our data both when we're in the office and when we're at home, or when we're at the airport getting ready to get onto a plane to go talk to a client, and we have that big business meeting coming up that we need to get some data for, or as you're walking into a meeting maybe. You want to be able to get that data when you're on the move, and it needs to be accessible very easily for you when you're on the move. So data access, no matter where you're at, again, is a key piece of both the current and future versions of Power BI. So you'll notice that there's a lot of different pieces at play here. You have Power Query, Power Pivot, Power View, Power Map. Now that can be a lot. It can be overwhelming for your users. So each one of those, as I mentioned, are actually plugins for SharePoint, or for Excel, excuse me. So those are all 4 different plugins for Excel, and that's the current method of creating Power BI reporting. The current method of actually doing deployments for Power BI is going to be to SharePoint. So that's either going to be SharePoint On-Prem, again, or SharePoint Online if you want to be able to share that data easily externally. So the part of the problem right now, again, is that we have those 4 tools. It can be a little bit confusing. It can be a little bit overwhelming for our users to be able to, to switch back and forth. Which one of these tools do I use for which piece of functionality? If I need to get data, I have to know that I have to go to Power Query. If I need to put relationships between my data, I have to know that I have to go to Power Pivot to do that. If I need to create some visualizations, I have to know I've got to go to do Power View to do that. Well, one of the really great things about the Power BI Designer is it kind of takes all those different pieces and puts it into a very simple workflow for all of our users to be able to work through. So Power BI Designer kind of takes all those different pieces and simplifies the story for our users. And that's really the future of creating reports and creating data relationships and all that kind of stuff for Power BI is going to be that Power BI Designer. Okay? Just like SharePoint Online or SharePoint On-Prem is going to be the current method of deployment for Power BI reporting, PowerBI.com is going to be the future tool there. So as soon as we get done creating that report inside of the Power BI Designer, we're going to deploy that out to PowerBI.com and allow our users to go out there and consume that data, whether that's on their laptop or on their mobile device of some sort. Okay. So let's talk real quick about the current state of Power BI. So what are we looking at when we talk about Power BI today? What do we really mean by that? Well, we kind of already talked about the different pieces of Power BI. Again, the ones that we're going to talk about are going to be that Power Query tool to go get the data, Power Pivot to be able to create relationships and also do some other calculations inside of there if we need to. And then Power View is going to be that tool for actually creating our visualizations. So all of that stuff currently is tied to Excel. So that means that we're partially, if you go out and you download Excel 2013 right now, you'll notice that Power Pivot and Power View are both actually built right into the Excel product. So that's good and bad for us. It's good in that we don't have to, if we need to do any Power BI reporting right now, our users, as long as they have Excel 2013, they don't really need to go out and get too much else. They can bring in data inside of Power Pivot if they'd like to, and then they can go and they can create reports right there inside of Power View. The downside of having all that stuff tied into Excel is exactly what we're talking about there. It's tied to Excel. That means if I want to create any Power BI reporting, I have to have a copy of Excel 2013 on my computer. If I want to get updates to any of the Power BI pieces. We have to wait for those updates to come through Excel updates or Office updates. So the part of the problem there, because it's tied to Excel, we're kind of tied to the Office team for updates. Now, that's not to say that that's going to be the way it goes forever. I don't know that there's necessarily a plan on the Excel side to decouple that from the actual Excel updates and have that be tied in with the SQL Server updates. I guess they could do that. I honestly just don't know what that kind of model looks like inside of Microsoft there. But currently, that's a big problem. Is we have all this added functionality that gets into all these different versions and releases of SQL Server, whether that's through new versions of SQL Server or whether it's through different updates to SQL Server. But we don't get all those updates into our Excel Power BI experience there. So that's kind of a problem for us. Currently, again, we're going to be deploying to either SharePoint On-Prem or we're going to be deploying to SharePoint in Office 365. We'll take a quick look at both of those and show you a little bit of the difference between those. Because the unfortunate part of all of this is that it's very fragmented. And what I mean by that is because the Office 365 has different features supported than what the on-prem version of SharePoint has. For instance, you'll see something that we'll talk about. We're not going to actually show it today, but we'll talk quickly about just the feature. It's something called Q&A. It's natural language querying of our data. So we can just go in and we can type in and say that I want to know how many sales I had in the month of January, or what was the percentage increase in my sales in the month of January over last year. So we can go out there and we can type in natural language questions like we normally would just go to a search engine and type in, something like that, or just say in conversation, and we can actually get answers back. Well, that particular feature is tied to Office 365. There is no on-prem support for that. Data refresh between on-prem and O365 are very different. There are things that are supported on-prem that are just not supported to be able to refresh the data in Office 365. I already mentioned kind of the problems that we have with Excel there is the fact that we end up with features inside of SQL Server, but we don't get those features inside of Excel. So we have a little bit of fragmentation in the current situation or the current state of Power BI there. So that's a little bit of an unfortunate side effect of the current model. And I think, I feel like they're fixing a lot of those and addressing a lot of those issues with the way that they're doing things with the Power BI Designer and PowerBI.com, kind of trying to centralize a lot of that work there. Okay. So the other thing, everything is in separate tools today. So it just goes back to that whole fragmented mentality there. Everything is in a different tool. Power Query gets updated separately from Power BI or from Power Pivot, and we have to go and do multiple updates. You have to keep track of multiple things. With the Power BI Designer, so far all the updates have been nicely packaged together, and everything's kind of come as one little bundled piece of software. So that's been a really nice feature of the Power BI side. All right, just a couple more slides here, and then we'll get into, I'll actually show you some of this stuff in the on-prem version of SharePoint, and then we'll talk a little bit about SharePoint Online. Okay, so now we've kind of got a little bit of an overview of what Power BI is. Okay, so that's going to be the ability to go out, query our data, bring it in, create some relationships, build some reporting based off of that inside of Power View, and then have the ability to share that someplace. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're at the sharing it someplace. So we're actually in the deployment and the managing of the whole service, really. Okay. The first place that we're going to talk about being able to deploy this again is SharePoint On-Prem. Excuse me. Okay. So SharePoint On-Prem, again, it's on-prem access only. It does require for all of these different features that you're gonna see inside of Power BI. They do all require an enterprise edition of SharePoint. So it's a little bit of a leap for some companies to be able to just stand up an enterprise version of SharePoint 2013 here in order to be able to do all this stuff. There is limited support for some of these features inside SharePoint 2010. But all the updates going forward, it looks like, are all inside of SharePoint 2013. Okay, so SharePoint On-Prem, again, Enterprise Edition of SharePoint is required for that. I believe it's currently Office 3 or Excel Office Plus, I believe is the version of Excel, if that's even an actual version. I can't remember if it's Plus or Premium Plus is the actual name of that version there. I can look that up if anybody does need to know what the actual version of Excel is to be able to get these features. But there is a minimum version of Excel, minimum level of Excel that you need there as well. Okay, so SharePoint on-prem access only. You can expose your SharePoint site to the internet, but I believe that also incurs some additional licensing issues that may pop up there, as well as obviously a host of potential security issues there as well. The good thing about SharePoint on-prem is it's actually quite flexible in a few key areas. One of those being our data refresh. So if we can put an external data source, external meaning it's not stored inside of our Excel workbook, so if we can put any external data source inside of a Power Pivot workbook, we can pretty much do data refresh on it. So we can refresh from a SQL server, we can refresh from an APS if you happen to have an APS, you can refresh from an Office 365 or a SharePoint list that's stored in Office 365, so something outside your organization even. You can hit an Azure SQL database, analysis services, on-prem, or you can hit something that's stored up in IaaS, any of those kind of locations. So basically any data source that's external to the workbook, again, any data not stored inside your Excel workbook can basically be refreshed. We obviously don't have data refresh for data inside of our workbook, because in order to do that, you would have to download the workbook and change the data, which kind of defeats the purpose of automatic data refresh. Okay. One of the semi-annoying pieces of this is the fact that it does require Silverlight to use PowerView on your SharePoint on-prem instances. So if you want to use PowerView, you do have to have Silverlight. That poses a couple of issues, because what some people realized was that they purchased, let's say, an iPad, or maybe they purchased a Surface RT, or they purchased one of the Android tablets that are out there today. Well, if you get on your network, even if you are on your network and that's where you're trying to view this data at, those type of devices don't run Silverlight. So it's very difficult to view a PowerView report that requires Silverlight when you can't install Silverlight on the device that you're using. So that is one of the limitations of the SharePoint on-prem. So you're going to have to use a laptop or a mobile device there that allows you to install Silverlight. We do have some version fragmentation issues here. Again, just like we talked about the fact that Excel updates on a different schedule than SharePoint or than the Power BI pieces and SQL Server, well, we have the same problem over here in the SharePoint on-prem. SharePoint follows a different release cycle than SQL Server, so we end up with a fairly ridiculous matrix of supported versions of SQL Server and supported versions of SharePoint, and each of the patch levels and which features are supported in the cross-section of those two things. So if you guys have any particular questions on supported features between a given instance of, or a different version of SQL Server and a given version of a different version of SharePoint, by all means feel free to send those over to me in an email, and I'd be happy to give you any information that I happen to have on that. Even when we talk to customers and we teach them about SharePoint and SharePoint BI, it's usually a very targeted conversation about the environment that they have, just because there are so many variations between the different versions of SQL Server, going all the way back to even 2008 R2 on the reporting services side, being able to plug those into SharePoint and be able to do reporting based off of that. So version fragmentation is a consideration in the amount of management that's going to take to keep up with those updates between both of the different products there, as well as the Power BI products in addition to that. So very limited mobile support. Again, if you've ever tried to open up a SharePoint site currently on your mobile device, whether that's your phone or a tablet, it's not exactly the best situation. The other part that limits your mobile interaction is the fact that you have to, if you want to be able to pull those things up on your phone, you have to be able to expose your SharePoint environment out to the web. So that's, again, as I mentioned before, that's a little bit of a security concern there for a lot of companies. There have been some major updates in the mobile functionality of SharePoint, but it's really still not quite there the same way that you'll see it currently and in the future of PowerBI.com. Okay. This is actually a good thing here, this last point. The data model is actually independent of the report. So what that means to us is that we can take a particular workbook and we can upload it into SharePoint, and then other services can even access that particular data model that's inside of there. So let's say that I have a workbook that has some Power Pivot data in there. I can actually go and build Power View reports right off of that and access that data, which is actually a reporting services feature. I can access that same exact workbook as though it's just another analysis services data source inside of Performance Point. And I can even build other Power Pivot models off of that data if I have it stored up in my inside of my SharePoint environment there. So a lot of different things that we can actually do with the data model because the data model is independent of the report in the current Office 360, or excuse me, inside the current SharePoint On-Prem solution there. All right, so enough slides for a moment. Let's go and actually take a look at, I'm going to open up my folder here, and I'm actually going to connect over to a VM that I have running. And let's hope this thing connects up to us just fine. I actually closed this right before we got started here because the screen had stopped refreshing on me. What I'm actually going to connect over to here is an instance of SharePoint that I just have up in a VM inside of Azure. Okay, so this is going to be essentially the same thing as my on-prem. So even though it's up in Azure, it's in just a virtual machine, so it's all very self-contained, just like you would have a SharePoint environment on your local machine. Okay, so kind of the way that this VM is set up, just kind of a little bit of background here, not that it's super relevant, but just so everybody knows, all the data is stored actually inside of a SQL Server database here on this particular VM. So we're not going out and we're not hitting data that's actually stored out on the internet or data that's stored on other servers or anything. Again, just a very simple self-contained environment that we have here for all of our SharePoint on-prem solutions here. So the way that we access all of our data here for the current on-prem version of SharePoint and Power BI is going to be through Excel. So you'll see here I've actually already got an Excel sheet created, just a standard Excel environment, again Excel 2013. What you'll notice up here on the top is I've got an option here for Power Pivot. I can go out and I can actually download and enable the plugin for Power Query to be able to do Power Query on here as well. And then finally over here on my Insert tab, I have my Power View options. So you'll see I have a lot of different places that I have to go in order to leverage the full power of Power BI. So I've got a tab here for Power Pivot. I have another tab out here if I'm using any Power Query, which I also have to go download as a separate application and install it to be able to get that tab in here. And then I have to go to my Insert tab in order to use Power View. So that's kind of the current state of things. We have to go to a bunch of different places, and you'll see how much easier that is when we talk about the PowerBI.com and Power BI Designer piece. Okay, so I'm not going to walk through actually creating this Power Pivot workbook and all that kind of stuff here. We're not going to focus on development today. We want to talk more about the deployment piece and the management piece of this and how it interacts with us once we're in the cloud, or in this case, inside of our SharePoint environment. All right. So I've already created my Power Pivot model. I just went out and I pulled in some of the AdventureWorks data. You'll see here I've got my fact internet sales. So down here on the bottom I've just got a line chart that shows all of my sales amounts based on the ship date. So what date this actually left my warehouse. Up here I've just got a bar chart showing the sales amount by color, and then a clustered bar chart over here showing my taxes and my actual sales amount by the product style. So real simple report here. Again, this one, something to keep in mind here is that I actually created this Power View report right inside of my Excel workbook. So again, you'll see that this is actually all right inside of Excel, and this kind of goes to some of the fragmentation that you'll see here in just a second. So if I want to, all I have to do is to do the deployment here, just File, Save As, and I can choose a SharePoint location to push this. So real easy to get that data actually deployed out there. My other option is to come over here inside of my Power Pivot gallery and just say File, Upload, and upload the document, which you will see is down here called Sales Backup. So deploying out there, real simple, either File, Save As, or just hit the Upload document. Super easy to do. The management side of this becomes a little bit more cumbersome because we have to deal with management of SharePoint itself as well as management of the actual Power BI content here inside of the SharePoint environment. So I'm not going to run through absolutely everything inside of here, but what you have to do to actually get this set up and going is quite involved. So we have to come in, first of all, we have to install an analysis services instance onto our server, and that's going to be a Power Pivot instance. The next piece that we have to do is actually come over here into our managed service application setting of central administration, and we have to create ourselves a new Power Pivot service application. So these are all things that you have to go through. You have to work with your SQL Server folks as well as your SharePoint team in order to get this piece set up. So what we have to do is do that, come into here, say new Power Pivot service application, and it will actually create the service application here. This is where all the management of the actual service is done. So this is one disadvantage of using SharePoint On-Prem is that you have to do all this setup, but you also have to manage the health of this service. So it's not just the SharePoint service in play here. We also have an analysis services instance that runs behind the scenes. We're really responsible for all the memory management on the servers, making sure that all stays in check. And also we're responsible for all the storage requirements. You know, where do I store all this data once it goes into my database and all that kind of information? You know, what servers is all this stuff actually stored on? So all the management piece here is actually on us. So there's a lot of different moving pieces between Excel, between SharePoint, between SQL Server to make this Power Pivot piece work on-prem. So we might come back over to this dashboard just to kind of show you guys what that looks like, but if we have some time here at the end. So this is what it looks like once I actually open up my Excel sheet inside the browser here. You'll see I can still interact with things. I can click on the different bars just like I normally would inside of Power View. I can control click and select multiple items here. So I have all the interaction that I normally would have inside of Excel. The thing I don't have access to is I cannot make any modifications to this particular workbook here. So you'll notice I don't have any edit options here. I can only open this in Excel or click on the Data tab and select some data refresh options. I don't have any options in here to actually make modifications to the actual Excel sheet or the report that I've got going on here. What I can do, however, is from inside of my gallery here, my Power Pivot gallery, I can find that workbook, and this goes back to the point that I was making about the fact that our data is disconnected from our reports here. So inside of SharePoint, I have this option here to create a Power View report, which will open a page that looks very similar to what we saw inside of Excel. And again, we have the same drag and drop user experience that we have inside of all the Power View reporting. So that's going to go out. It's actually going to hit the data that's stored inside that Excel sheet that I've uploaded into SharePoint, and it's going to build this report based on that. Okay. So the final thing here, managing our data refresh. I'm just going to show you how to get to this. Once we have the data uploaded, if we hit the little Manage Data Refresh option, you'll end up with this screen here. And we have the option to, we'll enable this, and then we'll come in and we'll manage all of our data refresh options here right inside of SharePoint. How often do we want to do this? Down to the day level. Hours of operation, so do we want to start running our data refresh outside business hours? And then down here at the bottom is each one of our individual data sources so that we can set data refresh on those data sources independent of each other. So while there's a lot of moving pieces here, there's also a lot of a robust functionality inside of here, very fine-grained controls. Again, the disadvantage is the maintenance side of things is a lot higher because we have to worry about managing the SharePoint farm here. You'll notice these are all the server health information that we have here, as well as what workbooks have been accessed and how often they're accessed down here. So there's a lot of management pieces that go into this as far as setting it up and maintaining the environment. But the flip side of that is we get a lot of control over what we can do. We have a lot of control over the data sources that we're refreshing from, where we're pulling the data from, how often it's refreshed, and we really have the most options for maintaining our environment there. So it just comes at the cost of management. Okay. On the Office 365 piece, this is, again, everything is Excel workbook based, just like it is inside of the SharePoint On-Prem version. But here, you saw in SharePoint On-Prem that what we had for managing the data refresh was we go into our Power Pivot gallery and we hit that Manage Data Refresh button. That's all we had to do there. That handles everything for communicating to each one of those different data sources. The thing that we get inside of SharePoint Online, or O365, is something called the Data Management Gateway. And that is what helps us pull data from on-prem and refresh the data that we store in the cloud. So all of this, obviously, Office 365, we're not going to be hosting the SharePoint environment. The Data Management Gateway gives us the ability to take on-prem data and refresh it or move it into a cloud space there. Big advantage with Office 365 compared to SharePoint On-Prem is that everything is done in HTML5 for your Power View reporting there, which means mobile devices are going to be able to handle that much better. We don't have to worry about the Silverlight limitations there. We don't have to worry about Silverlight updates or any of that stuff. It's all done through HTML5. Okay. In this case, though, the report is tied to the report model. So we don't go out and create all kinds of Power View reports based off of independent worksheets out there. We create the Power View reports inside and tie those directly to the data model. This slide here kind of illustrates how the Data Management Gateway works, and I'll actually show you guys real quick how to use the Data Management Gateway here in just a second. Essentially what it does is it handles that communication between the data that we've got stored in the cloud, which is essentially the definition of our report and the definition of our data sources. It takes those through that little proxy service there, and it communicates down to a gateway that we set up on each of our local servers. So that gateway down there at the bottom that you see is actually installed on an on-prem server. Okay, so there is a cloud piece that you have to do some setup on, but you'll also see here in just a second that we have to have that gateway running locally in order to access our data. Okay, so it handles the communication between those two, and then it goes out and it actually queries the data for us and pushes it back up into the cloud. All right. So again, it's used to move that data. It's used to link the on-prem with the cloud. You have to install that again locally on your computer. It's a real small download. It's very, very lightweight, but you'll see here in just a minute that you do have to have that installed and configured locally. You do have to have a minimum of one local instance. So we have to have some data to communicate to. We can install more data management gateways if we'd like to, and that will help with redundancy and scale, which will be handled. Multiple data gateways will provide some load balancing and high availability in case data sources aren't available, that kind of stuff. So we can install multiple gateway instances and get some redundancy there. And ultimately, this is what is actually doing all the data refresh. It's pulling the data, it's all the communication between Office 365 and all of your data that you store on-prem. A couple of considerations to keep in mind here that, and you'll see, if we have a bunch of data sources that we set up inside of the Data Management Gateway, how does our Excel workbook know which one of those data sources to pick? Well, the way that it knows is that the server name has to be the same between what you define inside your workbook and the data sources that we're going to define inside the Data Management Gateway. So the server name has to be the same, the database has to be the same, and the provider has to be the same. That means if I set up a connection and I tell it that I want to connect to a SQL server on my computer using the SQL Native Client version 11.0, I have to define that as the SQL Native Client 11.0 on both my both inside my Power Pivot workbook as well as inside the Data Management Gateway there. Okay. So if any of those three options are not present, then it will not be able to find the data source inside of the admin center. And the way that we're going to do all this setup is that we're going to use what's called the Power BI Admin Center. Okay. All right. All of our credentials are actually going to be stored in that Admin Center, and those are the credentials that we're going to use to access the data, not what's actually stored inside the workbook. So what I mean by that is if I go out and I create a connection to SQL Server and I tell it to use my credentials, my B-Shacked credentials, and then I go into the Power BI Admin Center and I tell it to use my SA credentials instead, the SA credentials are always going to be what's used. Whatever is entered in the workbook is irrelevant once the Data Management Gateway comes into play. As far as sources that can be refreshed from O365 through the Data Management Gateway, this is something that is a little bit more limited compared to what you'll see on the on-prem version. Because again, as I mentioned, the on-prem version of SQL Server and SharePoint, you can actually refresh basically essentially any data source, whether that's analysis services or any other relational data sources as well. Okay, so data refresh here is limited to SQL Server databases in 2005 or later, as well as Oracle databases running Oracle 10G, 11G, or 11G R2. And then the following slide that we're going to have here is all the Power Query options. So I'm not limited solely to just those two options, the SQL Server and Oracle. I can also pull from any of the following through Power BI, or through Power Query rather. So SQL and Oracle are still available through Power Query as well. I can pull through text files or Excel, other Excel workbooks or Access databases, SharePoint lists, whether those are SharePoint lists online or SharePoint On-Prem, either one of those will work. Any OData feeds that we have available out there, anything that's on Azure right now is currently supported. That's the Marketplace, HD Insight, blob storage, table storage, SQL databases, all of those are currently supported as data sources. Teradata, DB2, MySQL, there's actually one or two other ones out there on the web page as well. I didn't think those were quite as commonly used ones. So these are all the different options that we have to do automatic data refresh in the cloud through Office 365. Okay. So before we talk about the future of Power BI, let's go and take a look real quick at what this whole thing looks like. So I'm going to fire up a different VM here. Oops, not that one. So I've got a separate VM over here. And what I'm going to do, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to log into my Office 365 account at portal.office.com. Okay, I'm going to log in with this account here. And once my Office 365 portal here loads up, you'll see that I've got an option in here right in the middle called Power BI. I'm going to go ahead and click on that Power BI option there. And the next thing I'm going to do is go to the little gear icon that's going to load up here in the top right corner. This is my little Power BI center here. And I'm going to go to my Power BI Admin Center. So click on the little gear in the top right, go to the Power BI Admin Center. All right, so once this page loads here, this is where we're going to set up all of our gateway and data source information. So these are the two pieces of information that we really need to be careful, or that we really need to set up here. Settings, there's just a few settings inside of here. Whether or not we want to enable Windows authentication for OData feeds, we do have to have Active Directory syncing enabled there, and I don't have that set up at this time. And then over on the notifications tab, we've got some small notifications for different options here. Really good question just popped up in the chat box there. It says, is Office 365 free? There is a free trial. I believe it's a 30-day free trial, which is what I'm actually running this off of here right now because I want to get just a clean environment to show everybody. But there are a lot of different tiers for Office 365. I'll see what kind of information I can pull for you and put that into, put some links inside of a blog post that I'll do with some follow-ups to some of the questions that we've got here in the chat box. But O365 is not free there. So there are different paid tiers for O365. The model for Power BI, there's also an additional charge for Power BI, which I believe is $40 per user per month. So that's in addition to your Office 365 in addition to your Office 365 subscription there, you also have to have an individual user license to use Power BI at $40 per user per month, I believe is the price on that currently. Okay, so we got some notification information that we can set up here. The first piece that we want to actually set up, though, is the gateway. So before we set up our data source and define those, we need to set up our gateway. All we have to do is go to Gateways. We're going to click the little plus sign here. And we're going to put a name in here, My Awesome Gateway. You can put a description in here optionally if you'd like. And then we're going to click Next. So this Enable Cloud Credential Store to achieve business continuity for the gateway. Essentially, if you use the cloud for storing the credentials for data sources that are being used in the gateway, you can restore the gateway on any other computer which the gateway is currently running. So if the gateway becomes unavailable on any of the computers, you can easily go out and restore the gateway on a different computer because all the credentials are stored here online. When you store the gateway on another computer, you don't have to re-enter the credentials there for all your data sources at that point. So that's essentially what that does for us there. It allows us to store our credentials in the cloud rather than and helps us with restorability in case any of our gateways go down. All right, so we're going to click Next here. By default, we end up with one instance, as you guys hopefully remember when we were looking at the slides there. It's going to be a minimum of one instance here. So we're going to just roll with that one instance. We can change the name here if we really like to. We're just going to go ahead and create that for time's sake here. Click on Next. And then you'll notice that we have our gateway key here. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this gateway key, and this is what's helping our data management gateway locally communicate and authenticate with the data management gateway that we have in the cloud here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this key again. Everybody sees that there. I've already downloaded and installed the data management gateway here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click Finish. And you'll notice that it says my service is currently stopped. I can expand this and I can see all the other instances that I have available as well, but currently that's listed as stopped. The next piece that I need to do in order to set up the communication between on-prem and the cloud is go and run my Microsoft Data Management Gateway application here. And I'm going to click on Change Key here. It'll look a little bit different when you first come in. It won't say Change Key, it'll just prompt you for a key. But since I've already set this up once just to do a little bit of testing, we're going to go ahead and do Change Key. And I'm going to paste the value that I just copied from the website right here into this environment. I'm going to regenerate the certificate. Again, this is something that you won't have to go through that first time. Save that there. And give this here just a quick moment to save. While that's doing that here in the background, what I'm going to do is show you if you do want to create additional instances, all we have to do is click on My Awesome Gateway here or whatever we happen to have named this, and we can go down to Gateway Instances and we can add additional instances if we'd like. So I actually have the Data Management Gateway installed here locally as well. Let's see here, Data Management Gateway. So I could actually set up an instance of the gateway to connect to both my VM and my laptop here locally. Okay, so that's finished everything it's doing there. If we give this just a minute here, you'll notice now that that service state has switched to started. It's in the middle of connecting, and here in just a moment we'll actually see this switch over to from stopped, and it will switch over to a connected state. So while that's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next little piece here and show you how to actually set up our data sources. One question that somebody had here about Power BI, is it $40 for just the users or the developers? You don't have to, no developers need licenses to actually develop any reports there. It's the people who are actually accessing the Power BI UI here in the web are the ones that will actually need access to it, and we'll have to pay that fee there. Okay, so go ahead and refresh this page here, see if it has gotten done connecting. Oops, go back. And there we see that our gateway is now running. So we've associated the two of them, and our gateway is running now. All right, so now we've got that, let's go look at how we actually create these data sources here, because this part's actually pretty cool. Okay, what we're going to do here is I'm going to say I want to create myself a new data source, and I'm just going to choose from SQL Server. And I'm going to go ahead and check off all three of these. So I want to essentially make this searchable in Power Query, which you'll see here in just 1 second what that actually looks like. And we want to enable an OData feed, so I don't have to necessarily go through and find this inside Power Query. I can just paste the OData feed URL inside my Power Query window there. So I'm going to name this one Pizza. I'm going to select a gateway. It's going to be called My Awesome Gateway, that one that we just set up there. I'm going to connect to the SQL Server. Just give it my server name, which should be bs-ws-01, and the database name there is going to be Pizza. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do here is say set credentials. What you'll notice is this is actually going to run a little application here locally. The reason that runs locally is so that if I need to do any Windows authentication or anything like that inside my credential type here, it can validate those credentials while I'm inside of my domain. So I'm actually going to use a database connection and go with my SA account. And I'm going to set this to organizational. So private is essentially saying that I'm going to specify the individual users that can actually see this. Organizational means I'm going to say that it's going to be available to everybody inside my organization if I so choose, and then we can tell it that we want it to be public information as well and publish that OData feed, kind of enable the anonymous authentication there, if you will, on that. Okay, I'm going to click Next. So what this is doing now is it's communicating from Office 365, and it's going down into my local database and it's showing me all the different tables that are inside of my pizza database. So I'm going to click Next, and that's my account there already, so I'm going to say Finish, and it's going to create the data source. What this actually does for us here, if I launch Open Excel, is this is going to give me the ability to go and just search for this particular data set here. So now I've set up this data set, and any of the users inside my organization, they don't have to have access to that SQL Server. They don't even have to know it exists. All they have to do is come over here to the Power Query tab inside of Excel. I'm already signed in with the proper account here. And what I'm going to do is say Online Search. And once this online search comes up, well, hopefully this is already refreshed here. If I type in pizza, it usually takes a few minutes to refresh here. But what should happen here is whenever I type in the word pizza, is it should come up with all the different organizational data sources that I have associated online there with the word pizza. So that's going to be, there we go. If I run that again, you'll see all the tables that say pizza inside of it, and then just that global data source that says pizza there. So if I want to pull data from any of those tables now, all I have to do is come over here and say load to, and then I can tell it that I want to just create a connection and load that data directly into Power Pivot. So what that means for us is once I go ahead and once I save this workbook and I push it up to Office 365 and I store it in Office 365, when I schedule my data refresh up there, it's going to use the data management gateway. It's going to come down here and pull in the data from my dim pizza dimension there, and it's going to refresh it in the cloud with data that was stored on-prem there. Okay, so that's the way that we do the setup for connecting data through the data management gateway. Again, that's set up a gateway, set up a data source. If we'd like to, we can also come in and we can take any of our data sources from here inside of Power Query, and we can actually put those into Office 365 up there as well. So real quick, because I know we're running out of time here, I'll show you where we can access that. If I want to, I can do data, say existing connections. I can take any Power Query, oops, sorry about that, existing connections, edit connection properties. I can take this whole definition that I've got here, and I can actually come in here and say new Power Query, and all I have to do is just paste that Power Query connection string there, and I can use any other Power Query as well, again, as long as that uses one of those approved Power Query data sources that we talked about just a moment ago. All right, I'm going to zoom through just a couple other slides here because I do want to show you just real quickly the PowerBI.com piece of it. Again, it's a single development tool. You guys will see a lot of the webinars this month are actually going to revolve around that development tool, so we're not going to do anything inside of there today. Essentially, all you do is you go in there, you create your Power View reports, you create your Power Query, create your Power View reports, and then you just do a file save as up to your PowerBI.com piece. So you can still upload Excel files into PowerBI.com if you would like, and essentially this is going to be a really good competitor out there for Tableau. I mean, it's very, very usable, user accessible. The price on it is pretty low, and for PowerBI.com, we only have really one deployment option there. It's to deploy it out to there. We can create dashboards. Again, some of these things will be shown a little bit later in the month as we go through some of these other webinars. This is kind of the breakdown between the free version of Power BI and the paid version. So the paid version actually runs you $10 a month per user, so significantly less than a lot of the competitors are out there, with a few limitations. So we can only refresh daily instead of hourly. We don't get the data management gateway to get on-prem data sources there, and we lose a little bit of the fine-grained access that we get as well. So we are limited to only currently, this is a huge limitation for the current version of PowerBI.com, is we can only refresh on-prem to SSAS tabular. Sorry about that. I would expect that to definitely change in the future, but just something to be aware of there. If you have on-prem data you want to get, it's only SSAS tabular. You do have some other data sources there online, all the Azure pieces that you can refresh from as well. And real quick, I will just show you one piece of that website, just so everybody kind of knows where to go for this. So just PowerBI.com. I'm going to sign in. And once we get signed in here, again, keep in mind this is in preview, so there's not a whole lot of management that we can do out here at this point. This is the whole dashboard piece here. Any reports that I've created, I'll see those reports over here on the left side. I can click on those. Again, this is Power View generating some HTML5 Power View reports here. I can still interact with these just like I would inside of Office 365 or any of the SharePoint Online pieces. And then my data sets down here at the bottom. This is really the only management piece that we get here, is we can come over here, schedule refresh. If we have any, again, this one only has some local data. They haven't. I would expect to see them add more and more data sources for offline data refresh, or for on-prem data refresh, excuse me. Currently, though, again, only analysis services tabular. If I do want to do any of the data refresh through that, this little gear icon up here in the top right allows me to download the analysis services connector for the Power BI preview. Definitely keep the following in mind. You cannot have the analysis services connector installed currently on the same machine as the data management gateway. So as soon as I downloaded that and installed it the other day, this stopped working and it would not refresh my data with PowerBI.com. You do have to go out and or you do have to uninstall the current one and then install the new one. So last slide that I have here for you guys, the feature grid between the different services there. Today, online access is a little bit more limited in the on-prem versions. Obviously, the other two are completely internet-facing. There is no integration with any other tools for O365 today. We do have all the SharePoint services that we can connect to with the on-prem version. Power Query is available to us across the board. Q&A continues to only be a cloud-based option for us there, both O365. That is also available on PowerBI.com. It's a little bit broken right now, but it's supposed to be there. Mobile, absolutely. There's iOS apps already out there for PowerBI.com. There's also some Android apps that are coming. And there is no app and very limited support for mobile on the on-prem version of SharePoint Power BI there. So everything uses Excel. everything has some limited data refresh pieces that are going on right now. Again, I would very much expect to see them expanding the data refresh options for your PowerBI.com side as that moves out of preview over the coming months and gets pushed into a finalized product there. So lots of updates coming for PowerBI.com. Definitely be sure to shoot me an email if you guys have any questions. We've got a lot of great webinars coming up this month on just Power BI in general. So be sure to check some of those out and see actually be able to see the development side of a lot of these tools, not just some of the background information that we've talked about today and some of the admin pieces there. So much more streamlined experience coming in the future with PowerBI.com. A lot easier setup, a lot easier management, and I would expect to see that really come into feature parity with O365 and what you see in the on-prem product as well. Okay, so shoot me an email if you guys have any questions, and Liz, I'll turn back over to you.
All right, it looks like we went a little bit over. I know there were some questions that didn't get answered, so I will be sure to get them to Brad, and hopefully he can maybe do a blog post about it, and we will post on our social media and let you know when all that's ready and available for you. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.